Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in or downloading. I'm with Richard Phillips today. Richard and I have known each other for maybe 15 years.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I know Richard as a transformation sort of program manager. His background originally was with a Big Four consultancy in consulting, but maybe for about 3 or 4 years with them, and then into industry. And the reason that Richard and I speak quite a lot is because he's got a really broad set of skills, which almost give executive bandwidth to a board. Not only is he looking at transformation, people, process, technology, but he's also doing some hands-on sort of mini projects that are bringing that business forward or adding shareholder value. So I'm talking to him today because we've got a subject that's very close to my heart, I guess, and that's about men in vans and metrics in hand. What we really mean by that is, how do we reduce costs in a field-based business? So these are field-based engineers often, or field-based individuals that are going out doing jobs on client sites. But why don't I hand over to you, Richard, and you can say hello and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yes. So I've been interim now for, as long as I've known you, Mark, probably about 15 or so years. And my work predominantly splits into two bits of strategy. Firstly, deliberate strategy, where you have a plan to go from A to B, and that will be putting in new technology or replacing the entire infrastructure. And I've done big works for AA, where we completely changed all the technology from websites to mobile apps and tablet apps to what I call emergent strategy, where you start with an exam question, and this is the area we're dealing with today, which is my input into dealing with men in vans, which was why is it costing £200 to send a man out in a van, and that's the sort of the nub of it, really. But also in other parts of my career, I've dealt with small retailers with vans, so it seems to have hung around my career, people in vans and deliveries and home services, basically.
Yeah, me too. I think I remember, I'm probably aging myself now, but I remember in the good old days when we were working with construction companies, putting trades onto construction sites, and all of a sudden, there was this. We're going to start doing what we're going to call facilities management. I was like, what's that? And all of a sudden, this was the start of people going into vans, or trades going into vans, and skilled labour going into vans and going out and delivering onto customer site, mainly repair and maintenance. But now, if we look at the UK, a lot, you only have to be driving around and you see an awful lot of vans around, and these people are from big companies that you recognise, like, your Home Service, your British Gas, your RAC. These are all people that work for the business, that work field-based. And these are the people that we're talking about, isn't it?
It is, and it's very much the head office think they're doing this, and then when you go out and spend some time with guys in vans, they're doing something else. I mean, famously one, which will go nameless, a large company doing repairs, and they said, we know exactly what the engineers are doing every minute. And the first day out, I went with one of the guys in the vans who was sitting in a cafe with a whole bunch of engineers, all having coffees, pressing button on their computer. And they'd obviously worked out something that the head office didn't know. But a lot of these places start with a big problem, which is, why is it cost us to send a man out to do a basic repair for £110? And they didn't understand why. And of course, when you're in operation business, you've got loads of metrics, loads of things going on, loads of conflicting objectives, and it's trying to peel the onion. It's trying to peel back actually what is the root cause driving that cost. And to be able to do something about it, it's rather like trying to eat the elephant. You're trying to do it a bit at a time. So
yeah, we've seen a lot of companies do that. I should also add as well, we're going to say men in vans, we're going to say ladies in vans, we're going to say guys in vans, we're going to say all sorts of things, right? I think the vast majority of people that are doing jobs where they go in a van and go do a job at a client site, the vast majority are men. So, we are going to be saying men a lot. So I hope no one's going to get their knickers in a twist. We know that there are plenty of women out there that do a great job, but we're not going to pander to all that. What we're saying is, we're just using just regular terminology. Right, okay. So now over the years, I've spoke to almost all my clients who have this, I remember the days of we're going to start having PDAs. Do you remember that? They're going to start putting PDAs into, give the lads PDAs and basically going to start feeding into the system. Were you involved in that early days? Because I remember those days.
No, they were mostly workbooks, but it is interesting. So one of the
That's right.
organisations advantage was a franchise, and they obviously the client didn't have complete control of what the franchisees did or with the equipment. So they rolled out this very fancy equipment, and we went to see a franchisee, and they were using Google Maps and Excel to manage their workforce, and all the workbooks they bought for the engineers were used as book stops for the door open. They're all piled up. So clearly, I hadn't thought about adopting technology. And it was a multifactorial thing that we unpicked the issues, coming back to the earlier thing of the analogy, to find out why they weren't using the technology and what was driving the bad behaviour. And we managed to. It was a dream team, really. It was an operations guy, a financial guy, and an analyst. And we sort of almost dealt with it like a science hypothesis. We hypothesized the reason why they were doing their behavior was this, and then we went and looked for all the evidence for all those elements, and then we played it back to the senior team and said, is that correct, is that correct? And when we unpicked it, it was all to do with motivation and bonus alignment, why they weren't using this equipment, and also some adversarial relationships that had to be broken down. So we aligned a bonus scheme, got them a pay rise, and they had in order to get the bonus, which was around turning up on time, very basic stuff, repairing first time, and the customer not having to ring up to follow up. And all of that was tracked through recording the jobs on the workbook that was used as a book stop in the franchisee's office. Otherwise, it didn't have a bonus. So you create a virtual circle where you're actually rewarding good behavior. So
Well,
and it was a good virtual circle because before the engineers were bonused on those three things, which we'd found through NPS scores. Again, coming back to the analysis stuff as part of the project. And when they were bonused on that basis, the engineer went out with a card, gave it to the customer, and said, "If there's any issues with this job, please ring me, and here's my card," rather than the contact center. So there was this great thing about connection with the customer, feeling that the engineer owned the job. There was also the fact that then the customer rang directly. The engineer didn't touch the contact center, and contact center call volume dropped by about 15%. And they got better satisfaction scores. So NPS went up by, I don't know, 15-20% or something, because of this better experience, all driven by alignment of goals, figuring out what was driving their behavior, and I'm using this technology. So it was a bit of a good alignment of the planets, but it took us a while to get there because it was a gradual unpeeling of what was driving all this behavior and being able to find out what it was.
I like that you're talking about behavior. I also like the virtual team. That's a great team to set up because you're covering all angles at that point. But I mean, over the sort of 15, 20 years that, we saw workbooks come in, over that time now, the technology is so much better. It's just so much better. But do we still have the same issues in these businesses, that it's the behaviors that are causing the issues, not so much the lack of able technology?
Yes, I think so. And there was one, again, very nameless, where that we asked the auditor how much stock they had in the depot, even though they'd linked it all together. Every engineer had a box that went round to pick up the parts. And when we said to the engineer, he said, how much parts we have here? He said, well, we don't know. The engineers will start storing parts in their own house. So They didn't know how much stock they had, and they had all the thing, and then when you asked them, the engineers, what they did in at the weekend, they said, "Oh, we do work on the side, so you don't have to look far where they're getting the parts." So
Yeah.
again, it's behaviour, it's aligning objectives, but also yeah, there was obviously there was a lot of follow up activity after that discovery.
I can imagine. And I've heard over the years there's been some big horror stories that are becoming more and more familiar as time goes on. So I don't think a lot of the inherent behaviours have changed unless you get hold of it as a business. Now, I guess moving to present day, if we've got these organisations that have got best-in-class technology available to them,
Yeah,
and you've got some really good individuals out there who know what to do. They're professionals, they're good. They get in the van every day and they do a good job. And I think let's assume that everyone wants to do the best job to their ability because it actually
yeah,
makes you
yeah.
feel better. Then why are these businesses still having problems from a cost perspective with field-based engineers?
Well, it depends. Again, it comes down to what their motivation was on. One client, they motivated them on parts cost, not on total costs of doing the job. So, for example, they were fixing a bit of kit, and they had to get so many jobs done per day, otherwise they were on disciplinary. They were forced to do it. So,
Yeah.
whereas before they might make a cost decision about, well, actually I could repair this part rather than replace it. I'll I'll just I'll just work on this part, so it'll keep the total cost of the total job down. Whereas in a new scheme, if you bonus them on sort of doing 8 jobs a day, they'd just basically just pull out all the old parts, put a load of new ones in just to keep their job rate out. And of course, the cost per job went up because they were just replacing all the parts every time, and they wouldn't take the chance of that extra few minutes in sorting out that piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, some of the larger companies that we work with, they have multiple contracts with multiple clients, which means that the service level agreements they have to adhere to, which they've agreed to in the contract, are very different from contract to contract. Does the technology allow you now to, let's say, prioritize jobs per Monday on this contract, prioritize cost of parts on this other contract? Is it capable of segmenting in that way?
Yeah, some of them are, yes, but again, it's understanding the base that's driving it really, and also and also that the people understand they can make the judgment in front of the customer. I mean, you can't always get it right. I mean, there's customers. There was one company that were doing deliveries, more retail, but deliveries, and he got a very big delivery for this one person, and they were very very fussy. So he put the delivery right at the end of his roster, so he could have time to sort the customer out in the particular ways that she liked things delivering. And then she moaned about the fact that he'd moved the delivery slot. So, yeah, I mean, there's no technology to get around all that. So, yeah, I mean, technology definitely can help people make decisions about what they do. But
Yeah.
definitely,
So
so
if I was a client then and I got multiple contracts and the business could do better operationally, EBITDA numbers not where it should be. We know we're losing money through operational costs and serving contracts. How would you do it? Would you set up that sort of virtual dream team again of yourself, a finance person and an analyst, or would you
and an
look at it
operations
as
person, yeah, and
so? Yeah.
you start with the hypothesis. We think we're losing money because of the following drivers, and you start looking at the 80-20 rule about where the bulk of the costs were, how can you influence those costs, and start there, and then unpicking it and proving the hypothesis by more deep digging, using things like the 3 whys. Why is that happening? Why is that happening? And trying to get to the bottom of those things. I mean,
Yeah.
in a different business, in a housing association where they had a big problem with. I mean, it was a composite problem, and it's again fixing things, houses in this case. And one of the reasons that they were spending a fortune, obviously, on asset management and repairing boilers, and they discovered that the big driver of voids, which is the cost of people leaving without paying, was driven by the boilers breakdown. So you go to look to a high level again using the same idea. What's driving the cost? Well, old boilers and high energy costs, and that's why they were leaving their properties early without paying. So then we revitalized the workforce to focus spend on the oldest boilers most likely to break down. So there you've got double whammy. You're saving the company, focusing the company's asset spend on the ones that most likely to be the biggest return early, and you're also stopping these voids because you've got rid of the problem that was driving their energy costs and making them run away without paying. If that makes sense.
Oh, that's so interesting. Do you know, I think that's the reason why when we put transformational individuals into businesses like this who deploy engineers, field-based engineers, we always choose people that are hands-on because, you know, and I know you've got an hypothesis, but I think from a theory perspective, it has to move from theory to practical relatively quickly. And then once you've got the practical element of, okay, we need to change this, and this is how we're going to measure, then it's a case of doing the delivery, isn't it? And making those change. Can that happen fast, or is that the bit where it starts to slow down a bit and you have to do it like per individual or per team?
I mean, it does depend on the nature of the company and how they operate. Are they franchisees? Are they direct workforce? Obviously, because I mean, with the franchisees, you have to set up you usually have to. If you enforce it on them, they tend to. There's change resistance, and they some of them won't believe you and they won't do it. And you usually get the biggest troublemakers and put them in a. If I can say not troublemakers, but the people who have the biggest opinions. You put them in a franchisee board, and you go through the changes, you get them on boards, they buy into the changes, and then they would, communicate it to their colleagues, and then you get a much better uptake. And I guess with a unionized workforce, you might do the same. Looked at turning one business into a franchise, and again, we set up a board of some of the employees to talk through all the changes before you implement them. So sometimes you have to go slow to go fast with the change management agenda, and other times it's pretty easy, especially if it's tied to people's bonuses and they can see the logic of it. So it kind of depends on the amount of change. I mean, usually you do a big impact assessment to how it affects them, and figure out the best way of getting that message across, but never forgetting the change management part of it, because that's what could kill you. Because the technology changes is usually the small part. It's the hearts and minds. But if you get the logic, you start with a strong vision. This is why we're doing it. This is the goal. Then people buy in, especially if the incentives are there to do it.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you're doing the change management, is make sure that the incentives are there. Now, I think a lot of clients, when I've mentioned that in the past, have said, well, hold on a second, I'm trying to reduce operational costs, and you're talking about, to some extent, paying the individuals more. And I'm saying, well, yeah, because it's got to be reward for effort. It's got to be reward for KPIs and adhering to SLAs and things like that. You're just looking at the operational cost, but if you start looking at how much the customer's fining you, or how much you're going to lose that contract or that client or something like that, sometimes you do have to pay the engineers more to reward certain behaviours, but you can take the cost out in other areas when you've got them on board with you.
Yes, you do. I mean, typically you often build a financial model to try out some of these hypotheses and see what is the true driver, because it might be a component cost, and okay, you might sort it out, but actually it doesn't wash its face, and you have to try a different approach or different piece. And also you can find out, surprisingly, well, this particular type of job wasn't as prevalent as we thought, but it's driving 30% of our costs. And it's just below the surface, the why that you don't always put together. And it's stories that, sometimes the most trivial things cause the most noise and actually drive most costs. But actually, sometimes the more irregular ones don't. So, for example, there was one client and he had to dig up the floor to fix the leak. and they were using they rewarded people more money for digging up floors than they did buying a piece of kit that would go under the floor and fix it in the pipe, if you see what I mean.
So guess what they were doing?
So guess what they were doing? Yeah. So, if they're employing low skilled worker to dig up a floor and making a large margin on it versus spending 15, 20 grand on a bit of kit and getting a low margin, then they dig up floors. So
Yeah, I mean, sometimes this also needs a fresh pair of eyes. I had a conversation with a client, again, all our clients are nameless, but it was literally only a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that the lads were going onto site, and before getting to site, they were going to the supplier first and picking up the plasterboards. And the chief exec was going around visiting some of the suppliers that they work with. He's a really good chief exec. And the supplier said to him, why is it your guys always come in to pick up plasterboards, but none of our other customers do? We just deliver to site.
yeah.
It's like, he said, at that point, I was like, why have we got such big vans? That's costing a fortune. Why are the lads going there and drinking coffee, waiting for the plasterboards to be loaded? And he said, I could just see the cost associated with that. And no one's took a fresh pair of eyes, look at it. Look at a good supplier said, why don't you look at it this way? But I think bringing on an interim manager sometimes, or even a new permanent member of staff that's got a background in this sort of, operational improvement type, that can show you so many areas where you go, I never realized that. I never knew that. And that really helps, doesn't it?
It is, and actually spending some. It's like you don't really always remember the color of the carpet in your front room. You just know, it's part of your everyday life. You just don't notice it. And it's
True.
the same if you're running a very business and you've taken out all the core costs and you're running it quite lean. You haven't the time to do the extra bit of analysis to find out what are the cost drivers. What parts. It's usually a multiplying a sum, isn't it? It's number of, whatever, to work out the total number and the effect.
Yeah.
And it's only when you've got that time and model, and you've got some moment to model it and to try different ideas that you actually find out, well, actually it's this and not that that's driving the cost.
Okay.
So, and also some of the costs are more intangible, like, customer satisfaction and repurchase rates. So sometimes you have to have a bigger picture of the cost base as well. So not just a sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's a science. It's not an overly complicated science. Once you start digging into it, and now because of data analysis capabilities, systems, things like that, I'd argue that it's even easier.
Yes, it is.
The hardest thing I find is getting customers to start this because they don't know what they're starting. It's almost a case of I don't want to let this horse run because I don't know where it's going to take me. Now, what I've seen in the past is people like you have got this breadth of experience and depth of experience and the emotional intelligence to have those conversations from the engineers in the van all the way through to up to the board. Normally in somewhere about 6 weeks, they've got a fairly good understanding of where the 80% of the lift is going to be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it is probably sometimes slightly longer periods, but it depends. But you start. I mean, the one where we were asked what cost £120 to send a man in a van was supposed to be 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, we found a load of stuff out, generate some savings, and then we had another business case for another 3 months because we'd found some other bits and pieces there where we'd worked out a potential saving, and that drove the business case to employ me as an interim consultant. And I was there in the end 2 years on a continual bank of business cases for my employment. And the MD said, you're the most permanent temporary person we'd ever had when I left. Which was good. But it had a big effect. But it was always this cycle of lifting the lid, doing some analysis, have an hypothesis, work out the savings, model it, get it approved, do the changes, and then go on to the next project. So it was quite they were obvious things, and they could have said, well, actually we've done this and it's done it, and you've done it, and move on. But I think it's just the fact that everyone's busy doing their job, and actually all that challenge with doing projects is you need to pull people off their day job, not do it at the side of the desk. They needed to do it full time, and that's the challenge for most businesses.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, that the chief exec or the board member that's mandated this, that set this off, is a board member for a reason. They're smart. They've
Yeah.
got a good gut, probably. And then they know how to take action to then prove that and then make some changes, make some amendments. Then you've got individuals like you that've got the breadth and depth and the style and approach that is not destructive, because these things can be, but it's best not to be. And I think, 6 weeks to have a decent look at it. Within
Yes.
3 months, you're grabbing a bit of the low-hanging fruit. And what you're doing then is you're proving business case for the next, let's say, 3 months, because you're doing a staged gateway process all the way through. Now, when we do this, and we do this a lot, this is my preferred way of working, and a lot of our interims' preferred way of working, the board just sees it as value add the whole time. It's very easy to present at a board meeting to say, we've got this individual and it's this cost, but this is what they've saved. For the next 3 months, this is the projected cost, this is the projected savings. We can start to see and feel it across the workforce as well.
Yes.
There's no risk. There's no, let's allocate labour for the next 2 years to come and do this series of projects. It's just a bit vague. It's not that. It's very staged and it's very well managed, isn't it?
I think it's the rigor as well, I suppose. I mean, if you imagine it, the company ideas are sitting on a tree, lots of different levels, from the frontline guys all the way through the middle management to senior management. They've all got ideas, and they haven't had the time or the opportunity to link them together. And they're almost like we're shaking this tree, going through all these ideas. And the advantage we have is that we float through the organisation without any hierarchy. You could, you have to, you can go and
So
sit.
important.
So you can sit with the engineer and you can spend a day with him and get huge insight into ways that are the tip of the iceberg, where costs could be lying or problems lying, and
Yeah.
then a middle management the same, and senior management, and I'm just giving that rigor. I mean, 85% of the things are actually misinformation and they're not right, and a bit daft, some of the ideas, but the nuggets are there. Even the frontline guy, and he knows that he does this thing repeatedly and it generates cost for the business, but
Yeah.
it's, for whatever reason, it hasn't percolated its way up the chain for someone to do something about it, if that makes sense.
So true. I've heard that all the way through my career, supplying interim managers and independent consultants, from people that we supply at sort of 4,000 and 5,000 a day, doing full-blown restructures, really important, page 3 of the FT type stuff. And then, individuals that come in through as like analysts, let's say, and coming and supporting the rest of the team. They all say the same thing. The workforce knows you've just got to have the right conduit in place that builds trust quickly, that's knowledgeable about what they know, and then they'll extract this information and turn that into savings, or turn it into improvements, or definitely turn it into shareholder value.
Yeah, I mean, people are obviously protective about their work areas, and
Yeah.
there's a resistance, obviously, to people digging around. But I think half the battle is coming up with a process that everyone buys into. Of doing this work. So once you've done the process, then no one can knock the output. And most of the
Yeah.
argument sometimes is about how you're going to do the process, and do we stand by this process? Because people's jobs overlap, and you sometimes get into who's responsible for that, and it depends on the culture. But human people are defensive, so
Yeah.
and they're proud of what they do, and they don't want to be told by one of their colleagues to do something in a different way. Whereas if you've gone through the process, everyone's bought through, and there's sort of handoffs, and this is the grey area, and we need to do something about it. Having an interim, it de-emotionalises it, depersonalises it, because the interim's there to, if you like, take some of the change flack, if you like.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think if anyone's sort of listening that's in like a hiring position, and just running through some of this in their mind, I'd say that the CV shows some of the skills, and we all know about CVs and how true they are and things like that. But actually, the thing that makes a much more of an impact in this kind of situation is experience. Really good anecdotal examples of where they've done stuff like this before. But where it really matters, I'm finding, is the emotional intelligence capability of the individual. Now, it's very hard to assess that from a CV. It's pretty much impossible to assess that from a LinkedIn profile. You need to go to experienced interims or an experienced interim management provider and talk to them, give them a symptom list. And what they'll do is they'll show individuals who are capable of doing that job on a practical basis, but on an emotional intelligence basis as well. And these people do it combined. I think it's a really important point to make, because you're dealing with individuals in vans. They don't have contact with the chief exec. They don't have contact with head office that often, unless it's a problem, let's say. You need someone who can relate to the individuals that you're trying to change. I think that's really important.
Well, I mean, they're dealing with the customers more, and they have a wealth of ideas.
Yeah.
And they talk about the right-sided organisation, don't you? The triangle upside down, where you listen to the customer, and that's very difficult to do if you to practically to filter out the rubbish ideas and stuff, and distill it down to something that's easily actionable. And that's the job of an interim, to find those nuggets, sitting next to the guy in the van or the engineer doing the work, and saying, well, actually, I can see how the chain reaction of changing this way of working or changing how they approach things can change things. And the people in front of the customer, often have have those insights before the whole company realizes what that's.
Too true. I think we've pretty much come to the end of our discussion. I think that the takeaway for me was actually, there's a couple of takeaways from me. One is this sort of stage gateway of bringing someone in who's capable, but not having to worry too much about spending too much money over the course of, let's say, 2 years. It's a 6-week decision, then it's a 3-month decision, and then it's a every 3-month decision. These aren't big decisions,
No.
So I think if you're in a leadership position and your gut's saying to you that you could drive cost or save cost or improve customer service through field-based engineers, it's a 6-week decision. I think if your gut's telling you there's a problem, just make it.
Yeah, I mean, it can be just to create the business case to start with, and that can be, you learn more by doing the business case than you do actually the actual numbers. Actually finding the numbers and what's actually hiding the facts, and that can be one way of doing it as well.
Yeah,
so,
I like that. Anything else you would like to add?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've also applied this approach to launching new products, new service products. We've done the similar kind of deal. Just look at the basic business case, distill down the product proposition from the frontline guys, and make a business case, and then launch a new product on the basis of that insight as well. So it's not only just cost saving, but it also can be used to launch new propositions potentially.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. I think a lot of people would have got a lot out of this. So I really appreciate your time and actually sharing some of your knowledge and some of your insight with people. So thank you very much for your time, sir. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
Definitely. Take care. Thank you for the
Thanks.
opportunity.
Bye.
Bye-bye.